Good morning, listeners and viewers, and welcome to our Tete program for today, Wednesday, the 31st of July. It's the last day of the month, but it's a good time to catch us because we're going to be dealing with a topic today, a health issue that concerns, I would say, or perhaps some people are affected by this chronic illness of diabetes. We have with us our guest today, Dr. Devon Francis. I'm happy to say he's from the parish of St. David and serves the parish of St. David and has served the wider community of Grenada. He has been a medical practitioner for the past 18 years, and he continues to upgrade himself to be able to provide quality care. I would say care because I've known him to be someone who is very caring and very attentive to his patients. So he has been asked by the diabetics group, the Pedmata Diabetics Group, to be here this morning to share with us on one of the initiatives, education initiatives, to help our people. But before we invite Dr. Devon to speak, we do have Ms. Rosalind Douglas on the line. She is the president of the Pedmata Diabetic Group, the St. David's branch, and the Diabetic Association of Grenada. And certainly I've invited her to say something because it is through her initiative and the group's initiative that Dr. Devon is here today. So we'd like to welcome her and to invite her to just introduce as the president. So good morning, Miss.
Good morning, Tina. Good morning, Dr. Devon Francis. Good morning, and
good morning.
The listeners and viewers.
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Wonderful. So I thought we would just pull you in so that you can help us understand what's been happening by way of the Pedmata Group and this initiative, this annual awareness education initiative that you do every year. So please share with us just on a bit of the background of the organization and certainly what your interests, where your interests lie in terms of education.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I have been involved with the Pedmata Diabetic Group, which is under the St. David's branch of the Grenada Diabetes Association, for the past 10 years. At first, it was just to provide technical support. Then I became a member and now serving as the president. And we have specific initiatives that we do throughout the year that I'll be happy to share with you. The first is we have meetings. We have meetings every other month at the Pedmata Gospel Hall. The elders at the Pedmata Gospel Hall were so kind to allow us to use the facility to have our meetings as part of their community outreach effort as well. So that partnership is awesome. Our next meeting at the Pedmata Gospel Hall will be on Saturday, September the 28th at 3 p.m. So if you are a resident of St. David, you can definitely join us. But to answer your question, let me tell you a little bit about other things that we do. So besides the face-to-face meetings that we have every other month, July is our outreach effort, Too Sweet for Your Own Good. And we're partnering again with Tete to be able to provide diabetes prevention and management information to the general public. Prior to COVID, we would have sessions at various locations across the parish in St. David, but we have a broader reach through digital media, and we've had great success with that through you being so kind to allow us to do so. In addition to that, we're commencing in the month of August to visit the sick and the shut-in. So specifically persons who would have been members of the St. David's branch of the Grenada Diabetes Association who could no longer come out, we would visit them. And we would be bringing along a nurse to be able to evaluate them and answer any questions that they may have. Mm-hmm. So that's July. But our big month would be November. November is Diabetes Awareness Month, and we have already commenced planning for that. We would have a church service, free diabetes clinic, art contest, and an adult education outreach. Now, Rufina, you're going to love this one for the adult outreach. It's happening at the Tete Catholic Church on November 29th. Father has been gracious to allow us to use the community center for that. And then the church service is at the beginning of the month. And our free diabetes clinic will be on the 16th of November at the Pemmican Gospel Hall. So as you can see, we are very busy at the face-to-face meetings. We try to bring in a health professional to be able to give a presentation. So 3 examples of topics would be foot care, coping with the emotional challenges of living with diabetes. Yes. And then we also have the topic of how to cope with diabetes while aging. So we have a plethora of topics, health professionals ranging from doctors and psychologists. And one of the most impactful ones we would have shared with Dr. Teron Holston, who spoke about why amputations occur. And it was really a phenomenal presentation to understand what brings him to that decision. And hopefully, in the future, you'll be able to share that interview with your listeners. So this is it.
Great.
we are just doing all of this because under the mandate for the Grenada Diabetes Association is to provide information to the public. But in every parish, there is a branch. And we congregate at the Pemmican Village. So we are the Pemmican Diabetic Group of the St. David's branch of the Grenada Diabetes Association.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roslyn, and God bless you for the work that the association and the branch is doing to help bring awareness to our people. And that's why we have today Dr. Devon Francis, who has consented to be with us here in studio and will break a lot of things down for us so that we can understand a bit more about diabetes, how we can prevent it, and if we have it, how we can manage this situation. So thank you so much for joining us. And
my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes. So Dr. Devon, you heard Roslyn, and we are very happy that you have consented to be here. We know you are retired, as yesterday we said we have to spell that tire differently because you look like you're just starting off. So that's good. You look very good.
Thank you.
Yes, so we're going to be talking diabetes, and we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will go straight into our topic. So, listeners and viewers, it's Tete here in Good News Catholic Communication, and we certainly will invite your call at some point in the program. We take a short break now. Yes, listeners, welcome back to Tete for today. We have our guest, Dr. Devon Francis, and you heard at the beginning Ms. Rosalind Douglas, the president of the Pemmican Diabetics Group, speaking to us about the initiative and what is happening, and it is the Education Awareness Month. And this is the last day of the month, and so Dr. Devon is here to share with us on diabetes, prevention, and management. So, Doc, diabetes is not a word we want to use too often, but it's a reality that we live with and we have to deal with it. So your general view on this whole chronic disease or chronic illness as it would be called, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation from the Motor Diabetic Association. I am happy to be here, and I'm always happy to impart medical education where it's necessary. It has been a joy of mine for quite a number of years. Education is always the way to go, and I want to emphasize that the management of diabetes depends on 99% on patient education and patient willingness to learn how to manage their condition. You know, so initiatives like these are very important if we are to make any dent in the chronic disease of diabetes throughout this tri-island state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
Yes, so it's true. It exists in our families, it exists in our neighborhood, and we are quite aware every day of a cry, deep concern of this whole chronic illness. Well, it is becoming chronic. So tell us a bit again, because for those who are listening, sometimes we forget, what is diabetes really? What causes it? There are different types. So generally, just recap with us what is diabetes and some of those.
Right, okay, so diabetes is a disease in which the body has ability to produce or respond to insulin. The hormone insulin is impaired. As a result of that, it resolve in altered metabolism of carbohydrates that lead to increased sugar in the blood or the urine of a patient. And I emphasize those 2 points: the body inability to produce or to use the hormone insulin, because this would, in a nutshell, help to define the type of diabetes that they are. One, you have type 1 diabetes. That's where the body is not producing any insulin at all. Commonly associated with the younger population. And type 2 is the body inability to use the insulin that is produced. Okay? Initially, it may start off like that, and eventually, in the latter stage, you can have the body also not producing the insulin.
Okay.
Yeah? And that is generally what would characterize type 2 diabetes. Yeah? So for definition, we said that there are 2 types. Generally, there are 2 types of diabetes: type 1 and type 2. Also, you may hear from time to time what they call gestational diabetes, which is associated with pregnancy.
Yeah.
Right? But generally, it, as it says, might be associated with diabetes, and it might be something that we need to take note of, because later on it can lead into type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
Right?
So type 1 can lead into type 2?
No, gestational diabetes.
Oh, gestational.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. But type 1
remains type 1?
Type 1,
Okay.
right. That's where the body is not able to produce the insulin at all. Okay?
And what causes that? You said
Generally,
to do with them.
Generally, it's caused by autoimmune disease, where you have destruction of the gland we call the pancreas, which produces the hormone insulin.
Okay.
Right? So, in other words, the factory has been destroyed, right, by autoimmune disease and other causes. And in type 2, what you find, the factory is there, but the production is not as great. Or even the factory is producing, but the inability of the body to use what is being produced, right? Later on, we would see why the body might have that impairment or lack of ability to use that hormone, which is closely associated with conditions like obesity.
Okay.
Yeah? Just to break it down, it's like the hormone is being produced, but peripheral fat cells or fat cells block the receptors. It's like I have a key for my door, but when I come to put the key into the door, it cannot fit because fat cells are blocking it.
Okay.
Right? And that's a common association with diabetes type 2. Peripheral, what they call peripheral resistance. Yeah?
Wow. So we have this case of someone says it's hereditary. It's something that can, if it runs in your family, it's likely that you can have it. Or are there other causes of the diabetes?
Yes, to a certain extent, there is a genetic predisposition, and mostly we would find that in type 1. But also, we have to be cognizant of cultural practices. And I want to allude to a report that was published in 2019 by an organization called Global Nutritional Report.
Okay.
And that report alluded to the fact that in the Caribbean region, there is an average obesity ratio for women of 30.7 and for men of 22.8. Grenada currently stands at 32.4 in terms of that obesity ratio, which clearly indicates that Grenada is above the regional average as it relates to obesity. However, in terms of men, we stand at 15.6. So you'll find that men obesity ratio is lower than that of the region. But quite interestingly, for women that has an obesity ratio of above that of the region, we also find that women has the percentage of diabetes is greater of 16.1 in women than that of the regional ratio. And for men, it's 10.4, which is below that of the regional ratio.
Okay.
So that clearly speaks to a very correlation between obesity and diabetes. Okay? I want to emphasize that point. Based on the statistics that were presented, there is a strong correlation between obesity and diabetes. I also want to allude to another report that was presented by the International Diabetic Foundation in 2021 that speaks to the adult population of Grenada of 76,200 with a prevalence of 13.3 of diabetes, alluding to a number of 10,100 cases. That document was presented in 2001, that report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's likely that it can be increased since then? We're not sure.
Very good question. We could be sure. I want to say that, yes, it could increase. I want to say that because what the trend that have been noted from 1990, according to Euronews, the cases of non-communicable disease has doubled.
Okay.
The cases of non-communicable disease has doubled. And quite interesting, while that statistic refers to doubling of the overall non-communicable disease, what they would have noted is that from ages 5 in children and adolescents up to 19, it has increased fourfolds.
Wow.
It has increased fourfolds. I want to emphasize that point. And what that report also alluded to is the fact that low-income countries and developing countries that once had to preoccupy themselves with infectious disease and malnutrition has the burden now of non-communicable disease. Right? So that's another another straw on the camel back, as we say locally. And all of that speaks to the fact that we haven't really seriously addressed. I'm going to say that again. We haven't really seriously addressed the issue of diabetes. Many people might be asking what the doctor meant by that, and I want to pinpoint that report that was published by Euronews on the 19th of the 19th of April 2024. That publication speaks to the root of our problem.
Interesting.
Right. That alluded to the fact that there seems to be what you call double standards in the industry that we depend on so heavily for our nutrition for our babies.
Okay.
Right? It stated that, for example, in the developed countries, there is 0 grams of sugar in the baby formula and the baby foods. 0 grams of sugar in the baby formula and the baby foods in the developed countries. However, in the low-income and middle-income countries, there is 6 grams of sugar in the baby formula. There have been implementation in those countries. You may ask why that is so. In those countries, there were a code of conduct that was signed in 1981 by the United Nations regarding baby formula, right? I don't know, for those of us who remember, there was a crisis somewhere in the 1974 where they talk about the baby killer.
Okay.
That's where the baby killer, basically what it entails is companies that were producing baby formula and so were advertising how important the formula was for babies in the low and middle income countries. And a lot of babies, a lot of parents would have taken to the fact that they stopped breastfeed and started using the formula, and would have had issue with contamination and led to a lot of deaths of young babies due to contamination. Now, the point is that those developed countries have strict implementation of that code of conduct that was signed in 1981. However, the companies like Nestle and so would have found loopholes in the developing countries and lack of application of the legislation. So you will still find in some of the developing countries, including ours, baby formula advertised from 0 to 1 year. That code of conduct would have speak to the fact that we're not supposed to advertise baby formula for under 6 months or baby food.
Okay.
For the first 6 months, it's supposed to be strict breastfeeding. That was adopted by the United Nations.
Okay.
So the reality is, the numbers that we are seeing in the Caribbean calls for strict regulation and amendment to the laws if we are going to make any serious impact on diabetes and the numbers that we are seeing relating to obesity in our children. Quite interesting. They said by the age of 2, if we have been exposed to the high sugars and so that we get in the formulas, we develop an affinity for and a taste for sugar, which lead to increased consumption. Yeah. And increased consumption also lead to increased profits for those companies. Yeah? So, as much as we may hear all sort of things being done, the reality is, in the European countries, obesity and so has been strongly associated with those countries, but this is no longer so.
Okay.
Yeah? Developing countries are now feeling the brunt of those conditions. And that report alluded to the fact that because of the lack of legislative agenda, proper legislative agenda to protect the population, has led to an increase in those cases. Yeah?
Wow. Doc, you know, you're speaking here, and I just went back to Father Patrick. We were doing our Catholic faith, and he was speaking about this evil, as you might put it, that operates behind the scene, and the common man doesn't even understand, because he's about going to get his food, he's about survival, he's about, you know, whatever is quick. And then you expect the governments to be able to protect its citizens in this regard. And I must say that I was very touched by Sir Clive Lloyd in his response at that heads of the CARICOM meeting that was held down at True Blue, when he was giving his honor of the Order of Caribbean Community. And he spoke, I mean, you might have thought he would just talk about cricket and so, but he shocked everybody. And he spoke of this grave concern that he has for the health of our islands. And he pinpointed diabetes and hypertension. And he called them to action. And everybody clapped. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, somebody is, you know, hopefully, and the fact that they were all meeting together, you talk about government policies and legislation to ensure the protection of our people. I thought he was right on point when he himself could have spoken about that and to all of these heads of government, you know. And there you are speaking of that which speaks to that connection, that we cannot, in a sense, the ordinary person, we cannot effect that except you open our eyes as you're doing now, you know, and cause people to begin to see and to look and to read and have somebody to be that advocate for you know, this is very strong, and the facts are there to support. Yes.
Yeah.
So I know you may want to just, because the statistics, listeners and viewers, is extremely important for us to understand what is happening, because you also have the whole question of what is imported. You talk about the baby formula, but we have all these imported drinks. And it is so sweet. I mean, the sugar-based, the content is so sweet. And as you said, once you have developed a taste for this sweetness, as the diabetics, they cap this, too sweet for your own good. And it affects, you know, the health of the nation. Yeah.
Right. So in other words, we have to acknowledge that making any serious measure towards curtailing that disease that we are so plagued with, it takes a lot of more than just, you know, the daily responsibility. You know, that is okay that we have to adapt that. But the root cause, unless we address the root cause, we wouldn't get down to dealing with that. And allow me to speak about, I mean, another practice that always, that has bothered me for quite a while. And you know, as it relates more or less to the same point, in that diabetes and high blood pressure, they're very rampant. But when you look at other practices, for example, I always say to my patients, we in Grenada, we export a lot of fish. And we export fish to the developed countries. And what they did, they came down and they gave you ice plants. Yes, so they built an ice plant for you in Guave, one in Grenville, one in Grand Mal, and one in St. George's. In other words, don't put one grain of salt on my fish. Yeah? But when your fish coming in, it's okay to put a whole set of salt on it.
Yeah.
What is it that they know that we don't know about health? Yeah? And I always figure that the boat with the saltfish come down this week, and then the one with the medication come down the next week. Jesus. Because if I feed you, I'm going to medicate you. And that's a reality.
Yes.
You know, we can't get away from that. Just to stray a little bit, but it all boils down to the same, you know, that we have to open our eyes to the process of who is actually feeding us. You know? And I want to make a very strong appeal from that platform of the importance of breastfeeding, right? Based on the WHO guidelines, that the recommendation is that we should never start breast milk before 6 months of age.
You should never stop.
Start.
Stop.
We should never stop, sorry.
Stop, yeah.
Right,
Okay.
we should never stop. In other words, you have to do exclusive breastfeeding until 6 months.
Okay.
And that would bring us to a very interesting point, what our legislation is saying towards that. Because the mother would tell you, okay, after 3 months, I have to go back to work.
There we go.
After 3 months, I have to go back to work. So what happens? We gone into the 6 gram of sugar
Yes.
can. And that's where we start. You know? So I'm saying that to as an eye-opener
Yes.
for the legislations that we have, if we are to make any serious impact on the disease of diabetes, right? We can see clearly that the Employment Act or whatever it entails, or the legislative backing, does not support exclusive breastfeeding until 6 months,
Yes.
right? So a lot more have to be done in that area if we have to reduce that number of obesity that we know is directly linked to the can,
We can.
right?
Yes.
Just to put it in perspective, they said that the 6 gram of sugar is equal to 1.5 cubes of sugar. 6 gram is equivalent to more or less 1.5 cubes in per serving. Per serving. Imagine the based on the recommendation, if you have to feed the baby every 4 hours,
Yeah.
how much sugar that baby is getting in a daytime
Jesus.
by the age of yeah. So that's the crux of the matter. That's where, if we seriously want to make any impact on diabetes, that's where we have to pay attention or turn our attention to.
The root.
The root.
The root.
The
I'm
root.
really happy that we started at that point, because I came in here this morning thinking you're going to talk about, medication. And I mean, I am very touched by the fact that the discussion has gone in the way it is going, because the root is extremely, and perhaps you would not have even thought of what you're saying then, and just to deal with the situation because it is upon us. But it's like, how do you stem the tide? And this is what you are inviting us to do. Until we get to the root and accept that this is the root, then we are not going anywhere. So if you want to wrap up on that, and then we'll come back, take a break, and then we'll come back. But I think there's something that you wanted to add again.
But I just want to point here, because quite often, for me, there are different approaches to medicine. I am one of the person that believe in prevention, rather than trying to find a cure, because even the cure itself have problems. The cure is associated with side effects and this and all of that. So for me, prevention is the way to go.
Yes.
If we can prevent those things, that to me is the number one treatment that there is, prevention.
Yes.
Right? So our approach have to reflect that from my understanding of any serious engagement.
Yes. So we're going to take a short break, listeners and viewers. This is Tete for today, July 31st, with Dr. Devon Francis, and we are speaking about the chronic illness of diabetes. We take a short break now. Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to what I would consider a very interesting program, Tete today, on diabetes, and a wonderful way to begin from the root. And the doctor is seeking to help us to open our eyes from the babies, and he spoke about the formula that perhaps we are not even aware of, and the importance of breastfeeding. And the question is, if I have to breastfeed my child for 6 months, what will happen to me and my child and the rest of the family? Who is taking care? Who is championing our cause? When you see this in the effect of this in the long term, we'll have a healthier nation. Where is the medical association in all of this? Because you're the ones who are there. So we expect you and the other professionals, the medical professionals, to champion this cause.
The medical association is there, it's vibrant. I personally don't believe that we live in a age of lack of information, you know. I believe it's more a lack of use of information. Yeah. There have been discussion about that over the years, as far as I can recall. But understanding the seriousness of it, or really getting to sit down to understand the implication of it. Because at the end of the day, everything else that we talk about, the dialysis, the amputation, the medication, all those things spring from lack of action, in that sense, or lack of proper legislation, as would have proposed by the publication from Euronews, right? The statistics are there to support of the mass disparity between the high-income countries and the low and middle-income countries. Okay, and it's clear to see that the trend has been, the tide has been shifting, yeah, in terms of diseases that were associated with developed countries, yeah. What is common, as I alluded to earlier on, the disparity in application of the United Nations law or code of conduct as it relates to advertising. Yeah, that is what I think is plaguing the Caribbean regions and some of the more developing countries.
Okay. Now, but we still leave the challenge, you know, to impress, and particularly at this time, joining with the voice of Sir Clive Lloyd, honestly, and to champion this cause for our people who are vulnerable, you know, and especially the babies. So this is something that would have to be looked at in terms of where do we go from here. We hope when we call you back another time or another doctor, we can say, yes, a light is shining here, and something seems to be moving. You know, just talk about these organizations, and you just feel like you're just there to be used, and you don't really care for us. You don't really care for us. And it has to be said, regardless of what their money or whatever, but how do we help our people now to accept the responsibility, to take charge,
right,
you know, in the way that are available to them, their food and everything like that, regardless of what. Because, you know, we're in an age where it's convenience, it is the smell of the food, it is what's available, it is on the go.
Right.
And we are not seeing that we are doing this, and it costs you more in the long run because your child is sick, you know? You have to get the money which you already don't have. So how can you help us to see that with this situation, prevention, and at the same time, what can we utilize within our space?
Right, that's a very good question. And I want to commend the organizers for such a program, because I'm sure that this would at least light a candle in some dark space. And let's hope that other organizations would see it fit to engage in such discussion, because at the end of the day, it boils down to public awareness. Yeah, public awareness is amazing what can come as a result, or what we can achieve as a result of that. Yeah, so organizations like the St. David's Diabetic Association have to be commended for taking such initiative.
Yes.
And we have to continue to champion the cause for our population and seek justice in all those areas that are affecting us so that we can be treated equally like everybody else, like people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a common sort of discussion going around the world today.
The discussion has to continue, yes. Yes.
You know, treating one another like human beings, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is good, Doc. And the question of our foods, you know, what we eat. Because Bishop Charles would say something like, if you plant a bottle in our land, soil, it will grow.
It will grow.
It just tells you the fertility of the land that we have. And recently this guy was saying, Grenada is associated with Granada, with Our Lady, with a pomegranate in her hand. You know, with all these seeds of fertility and so on. So how do you help us? We talk agriculture, we talk about the land, we talk about the food. We have so much fruits here too. And one of the things people are saying is that our fruits are too sweet. Too sweet for our own good. How can you help us in terms of open our eyes to how we can use the products that we have grown here, homegrown products?
Okay. Over the years, I've been involved in an initiative that was taken by the Ministry of Health, where we had some discussion as it relates to childhood obesity.
Okay.
And they had a number of conclusions came out from that discussion, and they were implemented in terms of the use of what we call high fructose corn syrup products.
Yeah.
Okay, now high fructose corn syrup is a sweetener that is used in a lot of beverages, a lot of cereals, a lot of canned foods and so.
Yeah.
And that is strongly associated with metabolic disorders.
Okay.
So quite interesting, the ministry they came up with an initiative to ban the use, or the selling of carbonated beverages in school. Right? But the easiest thing for mommy in the morning is not to go and make some local juices, to grab a Coke in the shop and put in the child bag or whatever.
The box juices.
And something that disturbed me quite much. The ministry banned the sale of those beverages in school. But yet for all, they are sold around the school premises, in the area of the school premises. You know, it's like we're serious inside of there, it's going to harm you, but outside it's not going to harm you. You know, and I said to the principal, well, how come they are allowed to sell these things outside the school? When you actually...
Exactly.
In other words, to me, I find it's even more risky for the children, because now you're encouraging the children to come out of the school premises and buy it on the outside, where they can run into accidents and so. So if you are serious about you understand the implication, the health implication of it, you know, and the PTAs and all of that, and you invite and they understand, then we can see that, okay, we're not going to promote it around the school, we're not going to allow, you know. But the implication is serious, and maybe we don't understand what exactly, or maybe it wasn't communicated what was the objective of the Ministry of Health as it relates to that. But that needs to be communicated and articulated, including in the PTAs and so.
Yes.
Because that's the prelude to the numbers that we talked about earlier. Yeah?
So you're speaking of collaboration.
Collaboration.
You can't have it right here and it's wrong there. We are on this together.
That's
and
right.
we have to seek to work together for the elimination. Somebody was saying, it's not reduction, we're looking for an elimination you know, of these chronic diseases. And we have to be aware that we too are contributing to it through ignorance too, you know, and I guess the pace of life, convenience, you know, there are many things we said we have that, do we really need it? You know, because we grew up in the time when our parents were home. You know, the breadwinner worked. My dad and my mom became a very industrious woman. I mean, it's like you got something to eat, but you knew it was real food, however small it is, you know. There was this kind of homemaker, but now we are saying it's almost an impossibility to be a homemaker as a mother, because we've got to work.
I'm always intrigued by that perception of the speed of life, and every time I hear it, it kind of gives me goosebumps.
Okay.
Because there's a reality that you can work for 40 years, and at the end of the day, you can't buy 2 good weeks of health. Yeah? So if you decide to trade your health because of the pace of life, what you end up with at the end of the day would be in the negative. Yeah? When we talk about dialysis, what's the cost of dialysis? Do we have enough in the bank to sacrifice a kidney because we don't have time to do the right thing? You know, patients will tell you, Doc, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to exercise.
Too busy?
And you ask yourself, what is the priority in your life? You're going to give 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week to an organization, and you cannot give yourself half an hour a day to ensure that you are in good health. You know, that...
Yeah.
I still trying to see the logics in that. Even though I put on my glasses, I can't see it.
So you're asking a very deep question there. What's the meaning of life? Why do I exist?
Right,
You know,
right.
what's the purpose of my living? Sometimes we don't. We go through life without asking these things.
Maybe, I don't know if maybe to sacrifice some organs. You know, I mean, but it's a serious thing.
It's serious.
It's a serious thing. Because 2 of the best medication that has been prescribed to date is diet and exercise, you know.
Lovely. I love it.
Diet and exercise. Yeah. But people prefer to come and get the pharmaceuticals and don't have time to do that.
And that's another big one we have to talk about, the pharmaceuticals.
The pharmaceuticals.
The companies and, you know, what's behind all of this.
And
medicate us.
And those 2 medications, what is interesting, you know, what we have seen, you know, sometimes the patient come and they ask, why I have to get so much medication? Because you have to get one for the cholesterol, one for diabetes, and one for high blood pressure.
Jesus.
But exercise is good for all of them. Diet good for all of them. Yeah?
Yes.
So with one shot, you kill all of them.
Yes.
But yet for all, it's not on our priority list as a mode of treatment.
Thank you for saying that, Doc. Thank you. That's why I said at the beginning, you're a very caring doctor. And some doctors are not very quick to give medication. But by the time the patient comes to you, they already have a condition that you have to arrest, you know, and to help them to wean, I hope, to wean off the medication if they have to use that for the controlling of the situation.
Right.
You know? So diet and exercise, that's the prescription we are giving today. Yes. So listeners and viewers, I'm speaking here with Dr. Devon Francis. He is a medical practitioner, and he's sharing with us on the whole question of diabetes. It has taken a different trend, but a wonderful trend, a necessary trend, because we need to know the root of what is happening. We need to open our eyes, and he's here to help open our eyes. So I hope we would see it and take this for what it really is. And you can call if you have a question or you want to make a comment. We give you an opportunity, 435-0143. You can call to make your contribution to the program as we go on. So we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back, listeners and viewers. The phone lines are open, 435-0143, if you wish to make a contribution or ask a question. My guest, Dr. Devon Francis, will be willing to respond to you. Quite a lot has been said, and I think we started digging from the root, which is excellent, and that's where the source of the problem is. And so once we find the source, we can be able to deal with it. Now, we mentioned lifestyle changes. Really questioning ourselves, because the unexamined life, as one of the saints said, is not worth living. We need to stop. We need to ask ourselves, why am I so busy? And we keep using that word, and it's like we are just going on a rail. And you ask yourself, when you could drop down in the middle of your business, really. So we are invited to stop. You know, a few minutes can save. You know, breathe a little, be aware of yourself. Sometimes you're not even aware of yourself because you're just on a rail. So we heard what the doctor said. He's giving prescription free of cost, diet and exercise. But although we speak of the exercise that we know we have to do, which is walking, and in some cases some people do more vigorous exercises, we didn't speak too much about the foods. The foods that are from a nutritional standpoint that will contribute to the healthier person. So, Doc, do you?
Right. As we alluded to earlier on, we spoke about the food that have the processed food. We talk about the beverages and so that contains the high fructose corn syrup. Mm-hmm. And I want to highlight that, and I want to emphasize to the public of the importance of looking at labels when we go shopping, and the strong association with high fructose corn syrup and metabolic disorders that include obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Okay?
Metabolic disorders in terms of the function in the heart as well?
Right, it involves all of that.
Okay.
Metabolic disorder involves the inability of the body to process those different products.
Okay.
Right? It might be fats, it might be glucose, and so. Yeah? Simple things like a soft drink can give you fatty liver.
Okay.
Because of the high fructose corn syrup that is associated with it.
Okay.
Yeah? So I'm saying that it is important that when you go doing your shopping and so that you read the labels and look out for the high fructose corn syrup content in those products.
So what can replace that? What would you suggest? We look for that, okay, and if it's high, we don't take it, but what can replace that?
Right. The fructose corn syrup, as we said, is a sweetener. Right? So you have to look at, basically you look at the sugar content, the gram of sugar content. And we advocate sugar-free, or little or no sugar. All right, there's an acceptable level of I think it's 25 grams or so per serving that we can look at. You know, so you gotta sort of look and see what your sugar content is in those products, right?
So it's better to use water.
Water is always
the best.
You know, quite interesting. I came across an article that says that disease don't exist in alkaline pH or neutral pH. It basically exists when the body becomes acidic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the alkaline is if you explain that.
Alkaline is okay. That's when it's the acid is when the pH has a high pH.
Okay.
Right. And even a simple thing like the common cold, what it does makes the body acidic because it dehydrates you.
Okay.
Right? Once you become dehydrated, the blood becomes acidic. The content and all of that becomes acidic. And those viruses, they thrive better in those environments.
Okay.
Yeah? So water intake is very crucial. Increased water intake also leads to we have diseases associated with lack of water, such as kidney stones,
Yes.
hemorrhoids. Quite often you see patients coming and they tell you constipation,
Yeah.
right? So, and quite interesting, by just breathing, you lose 2.5 glasses of water per day. By just the intake, by inhaling and exhaling, you lose 2.5 glass of water per day.
Oh.
Yeah?
Well, I lose more than I do.
Right. So we're not talking about the body surface, we're not talking about urination and all of that.
Oh.
Plus that we are in a zone by the time you put the clothes outside, it dries. So it gives you an indication of the evaporation rate and how much we suffer from those complications because of lack of water. Yeah?
Wow.
So water is key. Water is very important. It's a very important part of the metabolic process. Yeah?
Sometimes people say it's so difficult to find stuff for breakfast, and you have to fall back on the same sort of food that you really shouldn't, like the bread, and sometimes you feel limited in terms of what the options are for a healthy diet.
Right. That has different, you can answer that in many different ways. Yes, you may find that might be a valid point, but is it sustainable? Because the reality, as you mentioned earlier on, if you put a bottle in the soil and it's going to grow. That's a reality. How many of us are involved in the backyard gardening to plant a little lettuce? I have a friend that is a farmer. He grew 5,000 bell peppers right in his yard on the concrete. Yeah, he bought flower pots and he grew his bell peppers there. Right? So the question is, you either make excuse or you find solution.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of solutions. I've seen places where, you grow flowers, but you can buy vegetables. Okay? And you don't even know sure what they're using to prepare your vegetables for you, but you're comfortable in growing flowers, but buying your vegetables on the outside. Yeah? So we have to think out the box. We have to think out the box. There's always a solution. It's a matter of finding that solution. Yeah?
Oh, interesting. Very simple the way you teach. You're a good teacher.
Thank you.
You're a great teacher, yes. Listeners and viewers, I really hope that as many of you are hearing from Dr. Devon. Very simple man, and very practical in his approach to medicine. And it's not too far or too, high for anyone. So I really hope that we would listen and listen very deeply and not resist what he's saying to us, because it's the truth. It's the facts. No, but Doc, the people who are diabetic, I'll be hearing you and probably regretting many things. It's like, oh my God, I've been so careless. I've been so if I had done this, it would not have been this way. And you don't want to leave them with this guilt, but the fact is, your reality is your reality. So what can you say to persons who are diabetic, or some might be termed borderline? And that's another thing. You say to us, you're borderline. What does that mean? That should have raised a flag, that you're not in a safe place. Right. So let's talk a little bit of the borderline and a word to persons who are diabetic and have to cope and deal with this every day.
Right. Borderline basically refers to, there is some parameters that are used. For example, most of the labs, we have what you call a test that we call the A1C, HbA1c.
The A1C?
Yes, the HbA1c. Basically, what the HbA1c does is that it measures the amount of glucose on the red blood cells, right? So it's an indication of how well the body is